Number 10. Shooting in the bathroom. On April 12, 2021, a police officer in Tennessee walked into a bathroom at Austin East Magnet High School and shot a teenager to death. 17-year-old Anthony J. Thompson Jr. was killed by a cop at school, the one place teenagers expect to be safe. It all started because police received a call from Anthony's ex-girlfriend's mother, claiming Anthony had been physically abusing her daughter. This is a very serious allegation, and so 4 officers responded to the school to see what Anthony had to say. When they got there, he was loitering in the bathroom, so the officers went to make the arrest. As they handcuffed the young man, the gun in Anthony's pocket went off and a bullet struck a trash can. But the sound of the gunshot caused such a mass confusion in the small bathroom that Officer Claybo pulled out his gun and shot the teenager, who then collapsed dead on the floor. But listen to how incompetent this police officer is. Not only did he get spooked by a gunshot and immediately shoot the teen who was already in handcuffs, he also shot another officer. After Anthony had been shot and collapsed, Officer Claybo fired again and struck another officer in the leg. Then they wasted time arresting a student who had barricaded himself in the stall because he was terrified instead of tending to Anthony. It took them over a minute to realize the teenager had even been shot. And in case you were wondering, no criminal charges are to be filed against the officer. Number 9. One jealous cop. An officer who had been with the San Antonio Police Department for 3 years was put on administrative leave in April of 2019. The reason was simple. Nicolette Muniz was arrested on suspicion of assault and family violence and subsequently charged. The incident happened at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Friday when Nicolette got into a dispute with her boyfriend. She learned that her boyfriend had been sleeping with another woman on the side. Although, to be honest, it was a little confusing on whose boyfriend this guy was. He definitely had a romantic relationship with both of them, but wasn't technically with Nicolette at the time of the attack. You see, Nicolette had called Kenneth Marino, but his other girlfriend picked up the phone instead. The 2 women got into an argument. Nicolette said, "I bet you won't say that to my face," and the other woman gave out her home address. This resulted in Nicolette showing up outside the woman's home at 3 o'clock in the morning. She wasn't messing around either. As soon as the woman came out, she beat the snot right out of her. The charges were eventually dropped against Nicolette, but she was given a no-contact order with her ex-boyfriend and told by her department to stay away from him. Number 8. The lingerie policewoman. Samantha Sepulveda lived a pretty busy life. She has over 100,000 Instagram fans and also happens to be a police officer in Freeport, Long Island. She's 5'2", full brunette, and so hot that she says criminals aren't mad at all when she's the one who arrests them. She even says she almost never has to get into a fight with perps, and instead just convinces them to put on the cuffs. Samantha claims her good looks and curves make her job easier because there's less aggression and dangerous situations are more easily diffused. Samantha began her modeling career in 2013 and has traveled all over the world to do photo shoots. It was only 3 years earlier that she had become a policewoman. In a news interview, Samantha recalled one time when she was phoned to deal with a man who had just beaten up his wife and threatened to kill the police. When Samantha started chasing him, the man was so overwhelmed by her beauty that he stopped, allowed her to arrest him, and then even asked her out on a date. Maybe if we had more cops like Samantha, the world would be a better place. Number 7. Taking a bribe. Officer Michael Mosley, or rather, ex-Officer Michael Mosley, was indicted by a federal grand jury on 2 counts of bribery. According to United States Attorney Matthew Schneider, the dirty cop took $15,000 in bribes. Michael had been on the force for 2 decades, but it all started going downhill in April of 2019. This was when Michael was a member of the Major Violators Unit. On April 3rd, he performed a search of a drug trafficker's residence. During the search, he discovered a heap of heroin and cocaine, as well as half a dozen firearms. The drug trafficker confessed that he had even more drugs where that came from, and even signed a confession. But what's weird was that Michael stayed in contact with the drug trafficker afterwards, and the trafficker didn't go to jail. You see, the dealer offered $15,000 in cash to not pursue drug charges. On May 2nd, Michael Mosley collected $10,000 in cash that had been left by the drug dealer in the backyard of some abandoned house in Detroit. Then on May 23rd, the officer took another $5,000. In return, Michael handed the original copy of the signed confession over to the drug trafficker, officially letting him go. Each bribery charge carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in jail. It's doubtful the officer is going to get 20 years in prison after serving on the force for 2 decades, but he's definitely getting fired and his career is over. All over a bit of extra cash. Number 6. Inappropriate photos and the Utah cop. A cop in Utah kept explicit photographs of a victim who was being extorted, showed them off to his buddies to get a laugh, and then the victim was murdered. Lauren McCluskey was a 21-year-old student at the University of Utah when she went to the campus police in October of 2018. Lauren was afraid of her ex-boyfriend, a 37-year-old sex offender named Melvin Rowland. Melvin had threatened to release extremely inappropriate and embarrassing photographs of Lauren if she refused to do what he said, and she had already paid him over $1,000 not to do it. She went to Officer Miguel Darras with her problem, and he saved the explicit images that were being used to blackmail Lauren on his cell phone. According to the investigation following Lauren's death, the officer showed them to at least one male colleague. He even bragged that he was able to look at Lauren's photos at any time he wanted. Clearly, the officer had no business being in any position of authority. He was a total dirtbag. Plus, 9 days after Lauren went to the campus cop for help, getting none, she was shot and killed by her ex. Her parents filed a $56 million lawsuit against the police for the way they handled this case. Lauren's mother says the very people who were supposed to help and protect her daughter instead exploited her and allowed her insane ex-boyfriend to murder her. Number 5. Stealing a corpse. On November 1st, 2021, something so insane happened that you would think it came straight from a Hollywood movie. A police officer in New Jersey struck and killed a man while driving down Garden State Parkway. Rather than calling it in and dealing with the situation, he picked up the body, put it in his car, and then drove away. Yeah, he stole the corpse of the person he had run over instead of taking them to the hospital or calling for a paramedic. The officer is Luis Santiago, and he was just 25 years old when he became a murderer. He was driving on the shoulder of the road at 3 o'clock in the morning when he hit Damian Dimka. The cop and his passenger, a male named Albert, left the scene, then drove back a little later and loaded the victim into the car. They didn't alert any other police or even try giving first aid. At the time, Luis Santiago was off duty. The two men drove to Luis's parents' house to discuss with the rest of the family what they should do with the body. But because Luis's father is a Newark police lieutenant, he set things straight. He forced his son to go back to the scene of the crime, and he called the police and ratted him out. His own father tattled. Luis had only become an official cop 2 years earlier in 2019. He has since been suspended without pay and is facing charges of desecrating human remains, vehicular homicide, leaving the scene of a crash, and endangering an injured victim. Plus, his passenger and his mother are being charged with conspiracy. Number 4. Planting drugs. A former Florida deputy was indicted for supposedly planting drugs during a traffic stop. Zachary Wester, who had been a deputy in Jackson County, took a bit of a career tumble in 2018 after these allegations came into the light. He was indicted in 2019 on 52 counts, including misconduct, racketeering, fabricating evidence, and false imprisonment. This is because he didn't get busted just planting drugs on one unwary driver, but roughly a dozen, and those are only the ones that came forward. Most of his cases come from traffic stops in 2017 and 2018. The officer arrested drivers and passengers alike and charged them with possession of methamphetamine and marijuana. But after many of these people came forward to say it was complete nonsense, the police had no choice but to look at it seriously. One of his victims was a mother who had been pulled over because one of her brake lights was broken. Wester then stashed a couple bags of meth in her vehicle and arrested her for felony possession and child endangerment. Zachary Wester arrested so many people on false drug charges that there were just no way the department could keep it quiet. They were forced to start investigating in 2018, even though they almost certainly knew what he was doing all along. He has since pleaded not guilty, although over 120 defendants arrested by Wester have had their charges dropped and been set free. Clearly, the people in charge know exactly what he was doing. Some of the people Wester arrested on fake drug charges went to jail for upwards of a year. One man he falsely arrested for meth possession, Chris Fears, lost his job, he and his wife split up, and his life fell apart because everyone thought he was a meth addict, when in fact it was just a really evil police officer who had nothing better to do than ruin people's lives. Number 3. Robbing a Marine. Stephen Lara is a Marine from Texas who was robbed by the DEA and had to sue them to get his money back. It happened in February of 2021. Stephen was on his way to visit his daughters in North California when he took out his entire life savings from the bank in cold hard cash. He had possession of $87,000 stuffed in bags in his car, but he wasn't worried because that was his money. Well, a Nevada State Highway Patrol officer pulled Stephen over because he was driving too slowly. When the officer looked in his vehicle, he saw the bags of cash. The officer was immediately suspicious, but Stephen denied it had anything to do with illegal activity. It didn't. Nevertheless, a DEA agent was called in to seize the cash. Even though Stephen wasn't charged with a crime, the DEA was still able to seize his money as part of an ongoing investigation. What this means is that even if the police suspect you may have committed a crime, or were intending to commit a crime, they can take your stuff and never give it back. But in this case, the incident went viral. Stephen happened to be a combat veteran who served his country in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he wasn't about to let the DEA steal his entire life savings. He sued them, and they immediately turned over the money to avoid any further embarrassment. Number 2. Drunk off duty. Ashley Hunter is an officer with the Miami Police, but she got into some serious trouble in May of 2021 when she got busted driving drunk. According to her arrest report, Ashley crashed her car on a Tuesday, and she was so drunk when officers showed up that her eyes were bloodshot and watery, and she could barely talk. Ashley refused to take a sobriety test and had to be hauled off to the hospital for minor injuries. After she was released from the hospital, she was taken into custody, then bonded out of jail almost immediately. But here's the part that's really going to bug you. Ashley was busted quite obviously drunk while driving, yet she was given a paid vacation. Ashley was put on leave with pay while an investigation was carried out into her behavior. And last we heard, absolutely nothing has come of the supposed investigation, and Ashley hasn't been fired. And number 1, stealing human ashes. A man in Illinois is suing the city of Springfield following a terrifying and traumatic incident with 6 of its police officers. It happened during a traffic stop on April 6, 2020. Dartavius Barnes was pulled over by a cop for speeding and running a stop sign. Okay, that's his fault. But the police officer claimed his vehicle had been involved in a shooting and had a bullet hole in it. So, the cops had Barnes exit the vehicle and put him in handcuffs, then sat him in the back seat of his patrol cruiser. 5 more officers showed up to the scene, even though there was nobody there except Barnes, and was very secured in the back of a cruiser. They proceeded to pour through his car like a bunch of vultures, and at one point, an officer picked up a sealed urn, a small brass object that the officer immediately assumed contained narcotics. The officer unsealed the brass urn, claiming it looked like powdered ecstasy inside. The police told Barnes that they had tested the substance found in the urn and that it came back positive for drugs, either ecstasy or meth. But of course, none of this was true. The urn contained the ashes of his dead 2-year-old daughter. The officer was caught on video lying through his teeth. He didn't test anything. He just assumed that the substance was drugs, not human ashes. The officers desecrated Barnes' daughter's ashes, and now he's suing the city. They're scheduled to go to court in August of 2022. Would you rather fight the city on drugs being planted in your car, or the DEA to get your life savings back? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe before you go, and I'll see you on the next one.